Hello?
Hey.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, how are you?
All right.
Slack went through some update and it said it had a bunch of changes, but I don't really know what they are.
I think it's the mobile app mainly. Not really sure.
This looks different to me, but I don't know.
Oh. A little bit. I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
All right.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a little bit under the weather, but I'm here. If we have a shorter meeting, that's fine. But I'm interested in talking about all this stuff. And also thanks to Manny, you did a lot of you took notes here and you mentioned some other things and set the page up, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
Does anybody want to start with updates or other things?
I guess I kind of wrote an update under the ISPSM. No, I'm moving slowly but surely through that. I've been getting screen fatigued very easily, and this morning for work I had to learn Adobe Illustrator, and my eyeballs hurt, and it was kind of fun, but it was I'm not good at it yet, so I was just like, there were moments where I felt like just very frustrated with having to use a computer in any form. But yes, nonetheless, I managed to take some notes.
I appreciate people staying on top of stuff in the Slack. There's like a lot of interesting things were posted there recently. The blind spot book we talked about a bit already. I guess it pops out now over here. That's cool. I posted the Karl Popper book there too, in the Slack if you want it. I should put it in Notion. I haven't done that yet. There's this ethnography thing here. There is. I'm gonna try to go to this tomorrow, in part just because I can. Like I think it's basically open access, and I got into the talk list, and it looks promising. And by that I mean this talk on doesn't say. It didn't say here. They had a title, but I guess I didn't include it here. But it looks like compositionality. It looks a little not, like cognitive psychology. So maybe a little more, not exactly what we're looking at right now, but I think it'd be nice to make some context in that space if possible, or get used to what it's like there, and I don't know, just try it. I'd say there's like a 60% chance it works out tomorrow. I have some other things, but we'll see. To be determined, I suppose. But it looks fun, and it looks like a lot of the talks up are, basically free things I can get to fairly easily. So we'll see. Yeah, I didn't get to look at this yet, Bradley, but I don't know if you want to say anything about this spiral pattern deal yet.
Just something I found. Thought we'd be interested in it. Typical dynamical system stuff. It actually goes back to things like Art Winfrey's work on cardiac spiral waves and things like that, but I don't know if they cite that in here, but this talks about the brain and cognitive processing. So, yeah, it looks interesting. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, maybe try to look at it before Saturday.
Yeah, me too. This looks really cool. It's one of my open tabs.
Yeah.
Suggests brain spirals organize complex spatio-temporal dynamics and have functional correlates processing. Oh, cool. Okay, this definitely looks like a, I don't know. It's it's definitely methods related. Whoops, there we go. Cool. And then today we had this discussion about cardiophenomenology. What do we say here? Oh, this is a new one. I think you said this is the one I actually ended up looking at. I didn't actually see this one, but we can talk about either of them.
Yeah, we had mentioned both of them in the Notion page before.
Oh, okay.
I didn't really read much of the enactivism one either. Despite having micro-phenomenology as like a keyword, it doesn't really describe what it is, but it's still very relevant.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Hold on one second. Yeah. Yeah, and I still the Feyerabend deal. I've heard of him a long time ago. I think I liked his stuff. But I don't have any particular context for him recently. But the bit about him critiquing Popper stuff sounds quite interesting.
Yeah, he was one of the characters that came up in that philosophy of science class I took, and if I'm remembering correctly, a abbreviated version of his view, it's like a relativism, is basically like anything that we can't see with the naked eye is like not scientifically real. He said weird things about like scientific tools, if I remember correctly. That like things that are only observed with tools aren't real. But that's probably a caricature. So yeah, I actually was reminded of him because when I was reading the notes on like first personal stuff, because it like if everything comes back to what you can like first personally experience, then this is like taking that to an extreme in scientific practice. That like when an experience is filtered through some tool, some measurement device, it's warped. So yeah, I want to find like the actual sophisticated version of that view.
Yeah, I mean, I caught a little bit of that. I had to adjust something here. I think there's something about like, I don't know. There's obviously like some phenomenological weirdness about that, because what if you're like blind? Does that mean like you don't have any valid experiences or anything? Or like what if you're, how does different actual embodiments affect that validity of things that you can't just look at with your default stuff?
Yeah, and the conversation exists in the context of like scientific realism and scientific relativism. So I'm not sure how to translate that to talking about like when a person has justified beliefs about the world or when they have useful sensory information.
Yeah, see, that's something that makes me I get a little worried about things like that, because there's a part of philosophy that I just really don't like. Actually, to be honest, I think most philosophy I don't like. And what I mean by that is I don't find it compelling. And it's really just that. I don't think it's anything. I think at least I find it like more earnest and perhaps honest outright to say, I just don't find it compelling, as opposed to trying to be, I find it irrational, or I don't find it to be logical, like trying to put a logistical or a sort of a certain, I don't know, lens beyond just personal sentiment. But I think it's fair to say that I find it to be kind of like, there's certain kinds of deliberations and discussions that I don't really know where they go or what they do. And I know we talked some time ago, I think, I don't know if that was part of the 3QX problem, Bradley, but
What was part of it?
The scientific, like the realism versus relativism stuff. I know they came to two different discussions.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about that, but not like taking any sort of position on it, I guess, or it's like one of those things where, well, yeah, we just haven't gotten that deeply into it. But we've talked a little bit about it, like sort of nibbling at the edges of it, but.
Yeah, and I'm kind of okay if we don't dive into it too much, because I feel like I think there's some. If I was like a full philosopher who wanted to just like, oh, here's my hot takes and come with like philosophy fight club and just debate about it, like I could see that being an appealing arena to do it in. But I feel like I'm the furthest on the other side of the spectrum from wanting to do that. And I don't know why. I'm open to philosophical people telling me why that might be the case, but I just feel like I don't think it solves problems that I'm interested in dealing with. Yeah, anyway, I am curious to look at the critique of it here, and there's sort of something here that I would look at, but we can kind of just, I don't know. There's probably a lot to say, but we can kind of move on to other stuff unless people want to make any other remarks about it, I guess.
I just want to remark that I completely know what you mean when you say you just don't find a lot of philosophy compelling. Yeah, I feel the same way, which is why grad school got really hard when I had to sit through seminars where the whole subject just felt made up. I guess that's like stronger than just saying I don't find it compelling. Like you said, maybe I shouldn't say that, but I think sometimes, yeah, what philosophers talk about is made up, and not like for the sake of solving a real problem, but it's just made up problems so people can keep publishing.
Well, yeah, and also like I find it to be like making people have to learn that before they can talk about the questions they want to do is a little strange, and I would value it more. We don't have to go on this tangent too much longer, but I would say I would value more if I believed that there was a real bedrock of like sanity that pervaded from a certain era, and that we can just like, yes, this is the ultimate ground truth. And I don't think that exists for a variety of reasons. Part of which is and you guys kind of know this, but part of which is a little bit of an allusion to like a big macro dream project, because I like justifying why I feel that way is something I would love to do like in 20 years time. and kind of like this would be great, but and important even, but probably not like tenable or questionable use of my time.
It seems like, is philosophy compelling is itself a philosophical question that you can't really answer easily. So
yeah. Spilled up on myself. Oops. And sort of like one actually really important thing that I thought of. I don't know if I can. Maybe I can find it quickly. Actually, I didn't really consider, or like, and I don't know what critical theory. I'm a newbie to all this stuff. I didn't really consider that phenomenology would be listed as a critical theory in and of itself, at least in terms of like whatever Reddit critical theory is saying. Because I was at a bookstore, believe it or not, and there was like critical theory since 1965. And I considered getting it, but then I realized it was only like 20 years of it.
Mhm.
But it kind of listed, it had like a lot of the French people like Foucault and other people, and kind of gave a list of things. It looked quite good, but I ended up not getting it. And I was looking online to see if other books that would be, what's critical theory in a modern sense? It's not just to listen to a bunch of really, older things and so on. And I found this list, and what I would ask you, and we don't have to go into this too much, but like, what is critical theory? Like, what denunciates it from other things? Let's see. Has a broad meaning in philosophy, history, social sciences. Critical theory is the narrow sense, designates several generations of German philosophers and social theorists in Western European Marxist tradition, known as the Frankfurt School. Is that I trust Stanford, but
well, yeah, I guess so.
I'm part of that school, so.
Yeah, I think there's like capital C critical theory, which is that like tradition after I don't know, like, yeah, so the Frankfurt School writers are listed there. But then I think more generally it's just like a kind of I don't know, an approach to like social philosophy that looks for like the assumptions that are present in the background of all kinds of issues, and then question those assumptions.
I'm reading a little bit of Foucault, and people have mentioned Derrida to me a few times. Like, I get why Foucault is like, I get why he's a critical theorist. Like, it makes a lot of sense to me. Freud and Jung, I'm warming up to. Levi Strauss, I get. Post-structuralism makes a little bit of sense to me. Like, I think I get what that's about, but I feel like there's a version of what I'd want to do where I'm kind of like take all these people and their views and determine the distance from where I think things should be and where they should go. But that's like not. That's like if I'm just, billionaire playboy who isn't a playboy but just does all like superfluous philosophical work. That would be what I would do in that situation. So I'm not there yet, and I'm sure you're both pretty happy that I'm not there. So yeah, there's a lot to say here. Thank you for mentioning this. I'm kind of wasting time here. I'm sorry, I'm not really on point today. I guess my updates are. I actually was kind of glad to mention the critical theory stuff because that's been on my mind a little bit. It's been. I do want to try to go to the Harvard stuff tomorrow. There's some. Where'd you go? Here we go. Oh, Slack is a little different for me now that it updated. It's displaying things differently. There's interesting hidden exploration and hidden worlds. I don't know if we want to try to do something for that. I think it's super close. It's like next week, so I don't know.
Oh, this is for writing MIT Tech Review. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's.
I'll think about it. Probably not. There's a few things here. There's the HCI journal we could maybe post in the future. This previous thing. This is up and coming too. I really want to try to go to this, and I keep worrying I'm not going to do it, but that's cool. Okay. I think that's general updates enough for me. Let's see. So we can go back to this text, which is the first text, Cardiophenomenology. We took a bunch of lovely notes here. This is sort of the introduction. As a reminder, it's kind of it's Depraz, kind of building from Varela in order to proceed with the refinement, looking at cardiovascular level, and I think kind of choosing it because it's something that we can feel and individually relate to in our subjective experiences, and kind of going out from there as something to kind of build on Varela's lineage. This is here from neurophenomenology to cardiophenomenology. Space-time and anticipatory motor perception. And I said this from the conclusion. We aim to establish that the synchrony of the organic heart and the lived heart during a bodily and emotional experience of surprise happens according to a common time scale of half second, second to half second. So they're moving towards some, what was it called in my the mutually generative constraints, mutually something, mutually informed constraints, and then making it generative somewhere. I forget where that discussion is. Yeah, this is a discussion of phenomenology of everything, and this thing where it was sort of, it's still, I think I might have it easily accessible here. Let's see if I can without anything weird. This post is still in the works, but I should probably just finish it tonight or something. But basically, we kind of liken this to 1p, 3p versus 3p to 1p. But I think there's something very, very specific about it too. That's kind of I don't know. It's almost kind of like what I interpreted the Feyerabend comments about getting at, where we're I think Amanda was kind of saying, well, a trophy form of it is sort of about like unless you can see it with your eye, it's sort of your ability to verify it is decreasing, and what does that mean? And I feel like there's what I'm kind of getting at with some of this stuff has to do with I don't know. There's sort of maybe a better way to look at the world is like there's a phenomenological view that, for lack of better terms, human beings perceive, and that's separate from the objective reality, and that's separate from the sort of like cultural or other things that are going on, and what is becoming specific about that, what those sort of views and lenses are might be useful. Yeah, I know we had this discussion about micro-phenomenology, which we might cover more of next time, and sort of the time scales of cognition, which is something that Bradly's talked about a bit in the past. I don't recall where we were. I know we're kind of around almost towards 500, page 500 here. I know we were kind of getting up here. And then I saw Amanda made some new notes here, but I like this part about the difficulty because it was sort of in our view, such a methodological difference of scale between the two dynamics, and by that he means, she means, or they mean, I guess. Oops, sorry. What does this mean? Let's review this because I'm a little...
This is where, and we criticize this a bit, where she was talking about the difference in time scale between like neural activity versus what we actually experience. So she's saying in the case of like the cardiovascular system, those time scales align. but if you just focus on certain kinds of neural activity, those timescales don't align. Neurodynamics objectively measured in milliseconds. But we were critiquing that because we were saying, well, it depends on the measure. It depends on what neural activity you're looking at and how you turn the data into, meaningful stuff.
Okay.
So I have a question about the neuro versus cardio phenomenology. So what are the differences between the two? Like if I were to say, this is neurophenomenology, this is cardiophenomenology.
So cardiophenomenology would be a subset because Varela, we mentioned that in his first paper where he outlines what neurophenomenology is, he has that footnote where he says like neuro is a stand-in for whatever third personal objective science can, address these questions about how the mind works. And so I take cardiophenomenology to be saying part of one part of the body that contributes to mental activity is the heart system, which she seems to define in a few different ways through the paper. But generally the cardiovascular system, that's now the neuro part. So it's not literal neuroscience, but it's still supposed to be this third personal study of the brain. So you look in neuroscience, you'd be looking for correlates of conscious experience in whatever EEG measure. But here she's looking at correlates between specifically emotional stuff, and surprise is one that she keeps mentioning. That's a separate paper. So correlates between emphasis and correlates between aspects of the mental activity like surprise and the physiological happenings in the heart. I don't know, heart rate. I don't know what else would count. If she talks about more detailed things, then I missed it. I know she cites a lot of studies, but
somewhere in here she says specifically we are trying to expand the cognitive system to include this aspect of cardiophenomenology. So it's explicitly saying that it's there's stuff that impacts it. That's not just the mind, and I think she refers the brain gut dynamic a little bit, but what in this paper we're specifically talking about heartbeat and the cardio, the self-referencing part of it. So I think it's an expansion pack DLC, exactly. So,
a refinement.
Yeah. Did you want to say more on that, Bradley, or follow up with it? Or?
Well, so the cardio is you have the sort of the first person or the third person cardio measurements, and that links to the brain. So if you were looking at affect and its effect on say some measure of cardio activity, that would be the first person or the third person aspect of that. And then but then there's also a first person aspect of cardio, correct? So that would be counting your own heartbeats or something like that. Am I mistaken, or is that basically how you would do that?
The first personal side wouldn't have to be focused on the body. So it could just be whatever I don't know, affective or emotional phenomenon is going on. It wouldn't have to be reflective. So you could investigate a correlate between, I don't know, heart rate and sense of excitement or a sense of irritation or something. It wouldn't have to be, it wouldn't have to involve conscious reflection on the bodily phenomenon. It could be after the fact, a reflection on whatever bodily emotional background there was to your experience.
Right. Like the reason I ask is because the way a lot of people will do psychophysiological experiments is they'll measure something to do with like heart rate or maybe some brain activity plus heart rate, and then they'll give a self-report survey and they'll ask questions about that experience or about what they were doing. Let's say they're doing something with media and they're measuring like someone's experience in a virtual world or in a video game or in a listening to a speech on the radio or something. You know, you basically get that self-report. Now, would that self-report count as a first-person account, or would that be more sort of a third-person account?
I think that would be a first personal account, but one thing that they argue for in this paper is like a rigorous version of that. So I think that like that first personal account would have to be like interrogated a bit or done by someone with like some kind of familiarity with micro-phenomenology in this case, phenomenal reduction.
All right, yeah. And then I asked, in the Slack, I gave a one-word question, which was micro-phenomenology, ? And all I was asking was like, I was just interested in how that fits in, because we talked about it last time. And
yeah, so I did start reading, who were the authors? Petitmengin et al., 2018. I made a page for it too. Discovering the Structures of Lived Experience. And it's good so far. I think it's illuminating on how this is supposed to be different from Husserl's. Still have a lot of questions. The central to this method is a focus on the singular experience, which is like a particular lived experience of reality, which I guess in contrast to Husserl, who I only know like through the On Becoming Aware book, really. So Husserl focuses more on like using the imagination, I guess. So there do seem to be interesting differences between micro-phenomenology and Husserl's. I didn't finish that paper, but I do need to figure out how exactly interoception fits into this, because interoception would be more like, trying to feel your heartbeat, like it would be a focused attention on your body, and that's not the only way to like gain first personal data on bodily things. I still have to think about that more.
But that does actually bring up some interesting issues. Like if you were going to build a computational model of like focused attention on something that is being generated by your emotional state, it really does get like the second and third order sort of feedback where you're producing some state, you're kind of monitoring that with your own attention, which can shift, and then you're processing that and reporting it, but you're also processing it, and it has some further effect. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I definitely think that this like second order, feedback. Sorry if you can hear the background noise.
It's okay.
But like the second order control stuff is super relevant. It was like mentioned a few times in this paper in Cardiophenomenology and in micro-phenomenology. But I feel like it was underemphasized because that intuitively to me, like when you can have something like in your control, like when you can like learn to control your like the bodily aspects of your emotions, when you can like consciously relax so that you can slow your heart rate, that seems like when you can really learn about the mind-body relationship.
Yeah.
In this context. So through this, I was thinking of specific ways to like differentiate, just like because I find this project so compelling. And like reading both these papers, I'm like, yes, this is awesome, but I need to find ways to, like, new ways of doing like holding on to the things that I find most exciting and interesting, but coming up with something new for this project. And that's one place where I was thinking that it could be really fruitful.
Yeah, that's great.
I would be curious, because I know I have the headbands that I mentioned, and those who could like basic EEG data. I say this coming from someone who's kind of steeped in quote unquote health tech, and these things that are easily accessible for recording, because you can record your heart rate pretty easily. You can record at least some versions of sleep measures. You can record those things. So getting it might be fun in the future, like a down the road thing if we stay on this path. And by the way, thank you everybody for kind of staying on this path. But if we build this out a bit more, like a path forward could be getting some experimental data sourced from a few combined metrics to that end. So yeah. I was going to say something, but I forgot it a bit. Yeah, I agree with all that. I feel like it's been fun to realize there's sort of this trajectory. Like I really wonder, this paper was 2018 from Petitmengin, and this was same, also 2018. So I kind of, it'd be really interesting to see kind of what they're up to. What their latest version is. Because I feel like Depraz is kind of on this path of pushing us forward, and people who are doing these, micro-phenomenology as specific instances of micro-phenomenology in one sense feels like almost like a process of documenting, and correct me if I'm wrong, like if you read more of the paper, I've only just the abstract. Micro-phenomenology sounds a bit like initial case studies of the specific, almost like a rudimentary, not necessarily fossil collection, but like trying to create these snapshots and of like instantaneous things, instantaneous experiences, or even going to cardiophenomenology and looking at the time scale. Like their conclusion is this time scale of a second to a half second or whatever it was, and getting these snapshots and saying, okay, here's some instantaneous stuff, and then maybe you want to move towards sort of a almost like a calculus or a excuse me. Moving towards these, taking these sort of fine-grained things and seeing what can be built from that down the road. So yeah, I don't know if you were writing some stuff here. Maybe I missed that.
Oh no, we were like taking the same notes in two different places. At the end of the Cardiophenomenology paper page, there I started taking discussion notes.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, we were about to get to your thing here, and I like your comments and stuff here too. So I do want to absolutely get to that. We have 45 minutes left, so we have time. The difficulty was kind of the time scale thing that I mentioned, and that led us right into time scale, LUTs, and Bradly mentioned, I don't know if you want to say anything more about this or just remind us of this before we go on to Amanda's stuff, but you said there was sort of like a paper to write about something here, and I forget if it was this or the time scales or something else.
Oh, Yeah, about different time scales of cognition. So you have like, the millisecond time scale, which is, cellular activity and, areas that are active. You have EEG signals, fMRI signals, and those all kind of emerge after, several hundred milliseconds. And then you have longer time scales, like, like a 15-minute conversation. There's a lot of cognition going on there. And it isn't just like, the way we usually measure it is we put like someone in a device and we measure like over a single trial, and then we refresh and we do another trial and we average those trials. And the structure of the trial is very favorable to sort of this interpretation of some activity that we can measure, which is good because we can get a sense of what the activity looks like. But it's also not good because it doesn't tell us enough about that process going on for 10 or 15 minutes. So, there are a lot of interactions there. There's a lot of feedback, a lot of, maybe collisions of things and accumulation of things and critical processes that kind of happen after you have an accumulation of things, those sorts of things. And so that's what I was kind of getting at with that. Now I don't know what it would look like necessarily if you were to like measure someone for 15 minutes and really kind of, because you're going to have like this sort of physiological trace that goes up and down. If you were to measure it just with a single parameter and say, this activity goes up and down over that time, people have done this kind of, in these naturalistic experiments where you put someone in an environment for a couple minutes and you get fluctuations in like different physiological parameters. But it's hard to really kind of interpret what those mean. So, putting this all together, we have these small scale things, these processes that build up to activity, and that's, within a second maybe, or maybe a couple seconds. And then you have these longer scale processes, which are dynamic, which have these different nonlinear properties. And we have ways we can measure that, but the measurement then it's hard to interpret because you don't know exactly, we don't have an fMRI of these longer term processes. In other words, with fMRI, we've, localized activity to different regions. We know if they quote unquote light up that they're, active versus some control. With a naturalistic approach, which is kind of sort of, I think, allied with some of this phenomenological work, is that you have this just free behavior and you're measuring things over a longer period of time. And you have, you can assume that maybe like the cognitive process that builds up over maybe the first couple seconds persists. You could assume that. You could also assume that it kind of fluctuates. You could assume maybe that it builds upon itself and you have a richer experience, which means what? You have a stronger signal, you can't increase forever. Or you have like these critical processes where you have, like, say, your attention, you sustain attention for a while, and then there's this, buildup of activity, and then finally it collapses because maybe there are other things going on. Maybe you shift your attention eventually, or maybe it's you reach a threshold of, you saturate your attention and it fails. There are all sorts of interesting things that we could map onto that longer time scale. And we don't know what that looks like because we don't really have a way to do that, a way to like kind of characterize if we were to have something that would measure, say, brain activity over 15 minutes in a naturalistic environment. Could we break that series down in a way that would tell us that sort of longer term progression of cognition? Because remember, there's even a longer scale of cognition, which is long-term memory consolidation, living in your culture and, learning things like rituals and other types of rules. And those are kind of independent of brain activity for the most part. I don't know if anyone who's really done any studies where they've looked at brain activity for long-term memory consolidation we have, but not some of these other things. And so, yeah, there's a lot there, these different time scales. I actually am thinking about this in terms of agents, where you have, like, we talked about Bradenburg vehicles, where these very small primitives of behavior, but over time, what happens? Do we get assembly of different primitives into more complex behaviors? Do we get behaviors that come and go, or behaviors that build up and collapse, or build up and sustain themselves? What are the dynamics there? I think you can do it with an agent. It would be easier to do it with
Well,
animals,
yeah,
obviously.
and I don't know if this is where you're going with that, but I could see like almost like agents as themselves representing. You could do, I don't know if schema is the right word, but like almost like programs. Like agents represent dominant programs, like in an evolutionary sense, or if one of the agents, which is the like a certain kind of I don't want to say cognitive function, but like time scale dominance. Or if there's a certain really high rewarding thing that's particularly recognized on a specific time scale, on the 15-minute time scale, on the 30-second time scale, and like that becomes optimized for, that would be something that I've thought about. It actually is quite. It's actually not to. This is a little bit of a stretch, but like the very first thing I did, when I did like completely clueless undergraduate research in effective computing was breaking down. Like I came up with a metric, or I thought about what it would take to create a metric to parse audio video information that was relevant in terms of the time scale. And my metric was basically if there were certain ratings of like a certain valence and a certain affectivity, and a certain I forgot what they were, the details, but if there was a certain amount of these like variations, or like the absolute magnitude of certain scores for a period of time was so high in that time scale, which was normal human, it was all standard video. It wasn't like micro video. It was just standard process video, standard time. But if there was a certain number of things that were taking place, if there was a certain number of things taking place at the time, then that was an indication. Okay, there was something salient happening here. So it's kind of funny that it comes back to that same thing, which is totally rudimentary in my eyes at the time, but it's kind of getting at this. Kind of maybe what we're getting at then is write this down. You have the phenomenological, subjective, third person, 1P, 3P stuff, but then like and then relating that to timescale predominance, or like across the different timescales. And this kind of goes back to I think what Depraz is trying to get at here in the paper is saying, well, we see a relevant time scale for this, as being a half a second to a second. Like we were saying, on the basis of innovative epistemological methodological hypothesis, our objective is that the practical and experimental implementation we need to establish the synchrony of the organic heart and the lived heart during a bodily and emotional experience of surprise happens at the time scale of half a second. And so I guess she's saying that like key things happen in that time space, which is kind of what I was gesturing toward as a hapless undergraduate, towards something like that at different time scales. So the Internet of Things, okay, for different, and I don't know if this might be totally BS because I don't really know what this paper says, but almost like going, okay, towards a micro-phenomenological analysis of method. Okay, so what across these different phenomenological arenas, what are the relevant timescales? Maybe that's something that is sort of we're gesturing towards.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I'll give an example from the lived heart stuff. So, like, the idea would be that you have the system, it's the cardiovascular system, you're monitoring it, and then there's surprise that comes. It's an exogenous thing where you get surprised by something and your heart rate changes, and that changes your perception of your state or whatever. And those events don't occur like on a sort of a regular basis. They don't come like every 5 minutes, or else they wouldn't really be a surprise. You have these surprise things, like if you were going through a haunted house you've never been through or something like that. You kind of know when to be excited, but when it happens, you're not expecting it to happen right at that second. So there's this exogenous shock which is distributed at some rate, and that's something that we can kind of make up as to say that it's at different intervals. And then what is the effect on the system? So, for example, if you have 3 or 4 shocks in a row, I don't know what a good analogy would be to that, but they're massed together in a very short period of time. I mean, that's going to have a very different effect on the system. You might have to stop and sit down or lay down, or you might pass out, as opposed to having a longer interval between exogenous shocks where you can sort of, it goes up and then down, and then you sort of have a different experience of that.
Right, because would it push you out of an allostatic point to, okay, now I'm in recovery mode. I have to clutch my breath. I can't scream. I can't move forward anymore. I have to just sit still or cower in the corner because I this haunted house is too much. Or on the other side, I was really excited by that last thing I experienced, which compelled me to move forward. But then you move forward enough, and it's too much too. So I think that's sort of an interesting. That really makes you think of Avery's allostatic stuff too, which would be quite interesting. Let me write this down. What does Avery call it now? Avery's kind of floating around with something called I think it's just stim. I don't know, typology is the wrong word for it, but they're investigating something about different stimulations and how different people might have preference for different, dystonic or the opposite. I forget the term, dystonic or the other of stimulation in certain areas, and how that kind of relates back to this too. There's sort of a general range of allostatic steady points, but then what different individuals are drawn to may vary. That's not what Avery says. I'm kind of combining stuff here in a mushy way, but yeah. I think that's very interesting. I think it's very interesting to think about that, the time scale, the impact, and what that means for sort of regulatory mechanisms, time scales, and I don't know, I want to say, I guess attributes, because I could say density, importance. I don't know, these aren't really real terms. I don't know. Anyway, that's a really interesting path to go down with this. Okay. So I think to kind of, I guess, return to the paper, kind of been coming up from all angles here anyway. I don't know if we were basically done or not, because this is sort of halfway to the paper, and I think it's about where we were, but we're getting to basically, we're kind of around here, the methodological argument in the paper. I guess they're talking about the framework of our neurophenomenological approach, neurodynamics, are subpersonal, situated far below the perceptual threshold of the subject and indirectly obtained to the objective millisecond scale measures. So I think she's making this claim that neurophenomenology is at a millisecond level and subpersonal in some of its activities. But cardiophenomenology, she's saying specifically, is the use of peripheral cycles, physiological critic measures is a more appropriate tool. And that's why 1 to a few seconds is subjectively accessible and a different thing. I mean, kind of, I guess it's like illusion, like a la, neurons fire different ways, and we can't really tell. You don't feel the neurons firing, but you can feel, what your heartbeat's doing, I guess.
I guess my question that doesn't have an answer for the evening is why can't we sense neurodynamics?
Did we talk about this last time? I think we said about this in Amanda, didn't we? I don't remember.
Yeah, this is where I think maybe there are some that we can sense.
Yeah.
Sure, you don't feel your individual neurons fire, but that's not the only sense in which you could maybe, I don't know, this is where like feedback would be necessary. Like we have all these EEG measures.
Yeah.
If we could put, an EEG cap on someone and compute those measures in real time and say like, oh, tell the subject while it's happening, like, oh, the coherence in the whatever frequency band increased. If that felt like something, then that would be interesting.
Well, also, like, I know this is a weird thing to say, but if when you close your eyes or like put your hand over your eyes and you see some people might call it, what's it, like static cloudiness or whatever, I forget the term for it. Like that to me feels semi-related to all this too. Like I should get the headband on a test what my EEG says. But like I think that's a great question from Bradly, and I think there are I think there's something there. I think that'll be fun to explore.
Yeah. So I guess that's a good answer, but where I was going with that was that, if you were an insect or some sort of marine invertebrate, you have these giant neurons that are very specific to doing certain things. So, you have neurons that are, have sort of relative to you have outsized importance as opposed to like some of the neurons that we have, And, very much may be that they can sense neural activity, at least somewhat indirectly. Mm-hmm. So, like in the sea slug aplasia, they do experiments with, like conditioning, where they like condition the intake valve and things like that. So, they can actually, that valve is opened and closed by a neuron or a small set of neurons. So, there are things like that where you have smaller nervous systems with maybe neurons that are bigger than, like, say, what we have in terms of relative body size, where they may actually be able to do things like synchronize the rate of, some oscillation as a behavior, because it maps more cleanly to behavior. But yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. It'll be another thing about, like, for agents, where you build an agent where you can specify the nervous system and you can say, this is what it would look like if you could, control those processes, or there was some connection with neural control processes. More like about like what the organism is doing in general terms, not in terms of like the autonomous activity of that neuron doing something on the behavior. So that's what I'm thinking. Like, I'm thinking about, like, it's sort of like a two-tiered thing. You have this autonomous, or in mammalian terms, autonomic nervous system that is doing this stuff that's under the hood, and you don't think about it. You don't have to think about it. And then you have this sort of, set of sort of cognitive things like attention. We think they're mostly separate, but they're probably not. There are probably some effects. And then when you put those two together, because they're separated in, say, our bodies, then we have this issue. But if we didn't, if we could sense what our neurons were doing, or if we at least had a collective sense of what they were doing, then that'd be a different story. We wouldn't have, it would be a different question, but it would be maybe a different way of thinking about this timescale problem too. And maybe there are organisms that do this, and that might be an interesting thing to look into to see how that is dealt with.
Yeah, let's throw back to the classic MetaBrains project, right? Like that's
you could put that in that framework. Actually, I might look into that.
Well, it reminded me of like what we were talking about before. Like the MetaBrains was basically that sort of, and I never really thought about it, but isn't that kind of what the Kahneman system 1 and system 2 is getting at?
I guess, yeah. Well, you mean Mars levels, or
Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
I don't think it's exactly the same. I just connected that a little bit now. Because I don't think system 1 is the base of the meta brain, like the thing that, like, the completely involuntary stuff. I don't think that's what he means by that. So were you gonna say something, Amanda?
No, just the Kahneman stuff is not exactly this, but maybe it would be helpful.
But it reminded me a lot of the MetaBrains project outright, which is sort of this not super cognitive, like operating, almost kind of to steal a little bit from Michael Levin, sort of like, maybe he's not Levin, but I think I searched him, sort of that which understands mathematics at a biological level and is not necessarily neuronal, but doing, like, it's incorporated the math, the calculation, the regulation. Like, it's kind of just, I don't want to say mechanical or machine, because that's not really it, but it's like, the biological, something like this, like the level which is like, okay, these equations need to be balanced, and it doesn't matter what you think about it. Like, that's a little like in your face, but like it's not really dependent on cognitive stuff. It's kind of like we don't consciously. There's not going to be a phenomenology of balancing your. Well, I mean, I guess there actually is. I think I was going to say something like balancing your salt levels, which is somewhat true. Like, you will crave salt. You a lot of times in the modern, like, standard American diet, you'll want food just because salt's in so much of our junk. Like, you want to know what you want, so you just I crave food. But your body's like, I just really want salt, but I can't say that. So I was like, yeah, I do like potato chips and a burger and everything else. Versus like you're like a diabetic who feels low blood sugar. Versus like one thing I'm actually really fascinated with is, this is a bit of an aside, but my sense of smell is supremely tied to how much zinc I have in my diet. And I know for a fact, if I don't have zinc, and then there's other factors, like if I don't have enough zinc in my diet, my sense of smell deteriorates. And when I'm regularly taking a zinc supplement, the intent, like the olfactory magnitude and crispness and the precision of the smells that I experience is so much stronger. And so it's funny because I don't feel motivated. I don't feel like, ooh, I really want to smell something more, or at least for myself. And I don't feel hunger for it. And so that's an interesting thing to think about in this context. But I know 100% the difference, and it's been over different periods of my life. I've noticed that sensory, like the it's almost like, on YouTube you have like 144p, 720, 1280, and you get 4K, 6K. It's like that. It really is like that. The resolution of my sensory input is dramatically different. And it's funny because I have no craving for anything I associate with zinc. I feel that with salt, I feel that with other minerals, other things. But it's kind of a fun thing to think about, just all the different. Could there be a micro-phenomenology of salt craving, of certain dietary things, or some people have like low iron. Can they register their phenomenological experience of craving iron, or like just what it's like to have a low iron and how they feel, like lower energy or whatever, like things like that are kind of, I'm casting a wide net here, but it's interesting to think about.
No, that's stuff I've thought about too, and like reflected on big time.
Cool. And that's a little bit, it's not entirely what I meant, but it's a little bit of what I was getting at in terms of the phenomenology of everything. And kind of like, I'm not going to get to that in this particular blog post, but kind of like that to get to your, okay, this is a great segue. I'm going to pat myself on the back for this. Okay. This is a great segue into this, where did it go? Did you mention interoception somewhere here recently, Amanda?
Yeah, I might have added it at the top. I wasn't just adding things to the bottom. I was trying to fit them in throughout the notes, so I don't remember where.
Oh, it might have also been it might have been up here. Yeah, this. How do we fit interoception in micro-phenomenology? And I think there's something to what I was just talking about in that sense, because it's sort of the different micro-phenomenal domains, which I don't know if is a real thing, but I'm just saying the words, might have different sort of interoceptive, like actual subjective experience domains or spectrums or whatever. But also, I think this is a great question, and I think this is kind of getting at, like, you could say this is why embodiment is so relevant, but also there's something about this also. Did you highlight this because there's a comment here, or why is it just a different color? I don't tell.
I just wanted to make it stand out.
Okay. I'll just say it like this. What am I trying to say? Affordances.
Yeah, all that's kind of related to me. So time is going by fast today. I feel like we're basically about to get here, which is refinement of both sides. And I don't know if it's better to just jump into that or to try to take from this, go from part 4, which it looks like this is kind of about the same space. So I guess we can just go from here. And I'll defer to you, Amanda, if you want to say anything about this stuff.
I like the framing of like both sides, because that's exactly what the embodied neurophenomenology project like is. So that's where I was trying to think of ways to like draw contrasts. So I think digging into micro-phenomenology next time would be helpful. And then this, I don't know, regarding like the physiological side, I guess they'll offer an alternative, because the kind of conclusion I had in mind was just that it would have to be something physiological. And so the cardiovascular system, sure, that's one example. So I guess I want to spend more time with the technology paper and go through these arguments, and see if there's maybe some other aspect of physiology that actually is better, according to these same arguments. I don't know, maybe like neuro. I'm not sure. I guess the thing is, I'm not sure how to further refine the physiological side. I liked her arguments in favor of the cardiovascular system. I don't have any alternatives. Maybe as I learn more about physiology, something will will come to me. But I did like the framing.
Oops. Yeah, sorry, I must have something open here. This,
So they refer to this in the title of the last section. Could you scroll up a little bit in the document? Yeah.
Here.
Up further. Up further. Yeah, that. Well, no, that's not it. Maybe down further. They basically refer to something like this as embeddedness. I can't remember. I think it was one of the titles of the sections. So it's down a bit more. Yeah, embedded. It's not coming up. Oh no, enactive. I'm sorry. So the bodily, emotional, heart extended enactive system. So this is enactive, or an example of an enactive, or extended and enactive. So I'm just trying to think of this in terms of the 4 E's.
Right.
Not easy to do. I mean, you never know what counts as what. So this is an extended enactive system because it's, well, how is it extended? I guess it's from the brain, and then it's inactive. Then it produces something.
I think it's inactive in like Varela's sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, for Varela, it includes both the bodily and contextual environment, all dimensions, as inactive components. Cognition, therefore, does not emerge from brain function alone, etc. So, juxtaposing to the cognitive, connection is okay. Coupling, yeah. Homological.
Right. I liked
Good.
homology and isomorphism. I thought that, yeah, particularly the timescale stuff really got it. Like we've seen a lot of authors throw that around with varying amounts of definition of like structural similarity and isomorphism. And I thought that this brought it a little closer.
Daniel Craig.
Yeah, Daniel Craig he's known as the Insula guy, but I guess he's doing things with emotion and some of this. So this is kind of interesting. There's this sort of aspect of, so it says more generally, Craig has two major arguments. One, the heart acts before one's awareness. So this is where you have that physiological set of events, and then you have to be aware of it, and there's that separation. And then this sets the stage for emotional experience. Which could be like if you feel, people use terms like, I feel my heart swelling with pride or something. But that's like a collective thing of like physiology. There's some thing that you're feeling. I guess interoception plays a role here, where you feel something and you interpret it. And then the heart is a key feature that contributes to the temporalization of emotional experience. So it's like that signal is that time scale or that temporalization. So it has to unfold before you can experience it, and then you experience more. And so that kind of goes back to the discussion we're having about the time scales and the.
Yes.
Right. So I guess what I meant before is like I don't have a bunch of studies of physiology in mind that could make a case for a different part of the body being as important.
Yes. Again, heart pulsation.
Maybe one way of further refining the cardio part of things for our purpose would be to like ask, like, what happens when blood is circulating throughout the body well, in terms of physiology. Like, I don't know, the oxygenation of tissues. Well, what is happening when tissues are well oxygenated? And maybe going down that rabbit hole, there's something that would jump out as like a correlate of experience of some kind of basic bodily background feeling. Yeah, I don't know what that would look like. I'm just trying to think of ways forward on this physiology side.
Yeah.
Well, I have a few things that jump out to that. I don't know what time you can do that, but one thing about let me just write this for a second. like So one thing that immediately jumps out to me about that, and again, I'm going to like disclaim this by saying in an adult human being, because I think there would be a lot of religious things, like we can't really ask this question to like a developing child or a fetus, right? And I think that'd be, if there was a language or a word to communicate with that, it'd be interesting in and of itself. But like I think of a friend of mine who has like chronic fatigue syndrome, and for them, their ability to recover, their ability to comfortably experience extreme emotions or handle stress is super different. Like it affects their entire. It's really interesting to think about the time scale level, because it's almost like there are components and things that relate to like capacity and then like what overflows the capacity. Kind of like what Bradley was saying about the haunted house thing. Like their ability to go through the haunted house is very different because what puts them over the threshold is quite different. And and it's funny because it affects certain regulatory processes and not others. There's downstream effect like on cognition, but it's not like the person I'm thinking of doesn't have their mental capacity, but their mental capacity and stamina and endurance and abilities are definitely affected by it too. So I mean that's super duper broad, but it'd be interesting to sort of try to break that down a bit more. The breadth of them is next. Physical and body effectivity and heart unity. That would be a really. I think we're going to have to come back to this next time. Even the embryogenic argument, genetic argument, the heart as the key for growth in the organism is kind of related to what I was perhaps just talking about development a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a bit in that was unclear to me, so I'd love to keep going with this next time.
Yeah, we can't really skip these points, I think. So I guess we'll kind of pick up point 2, 4.3 because we're running out of time again, thanks to someone's rambling, which is me. Yeah. Oh no, just to do something. Okay. We're basically out of time today. I think I'm kind of surprised, but I think this paper is really, really good to spend the time on. I kind of forgot about it over the week, and these different subpoints at the end will be quite relevant discussion, including the embryogenic stuff. Perhaps even most of all. Interesting. Merleau-Ponty with the 9 weeks deal. Electrocardiogram areas are present the same way as an adult state. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, for next time, I guess we'll get the exciting clues of this and then try to explore this a bit more with the micro-phenomenology paper. But I think it's a good use of. I think it's a good deal. So, any other thoughts? I guess.
Nope, sounds good.
All right.
Okay. Good stuff. A lot of really good conversations. I'm going to try to. It'd be really great. Like, you don't have to do this, but like, if you have some time between now and like this weekend, I want to just write like a sentence or a couple bullet points about kind of what we talked about, or like, I feel like there's so much stuff that we've mentioned as like, let's look at this aspect, this aspect, and it's kind of scattered across this document and the next one. So if you want to write anything in the Slack while it's in your mind, or come back to it tomorrow, I would encourage them.
That's why I highlighted the thing in purple.
Yeah.
I was like, there's so much here. I need things to stand out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll talk to you. We're not meeting. There's no reading group tomorrow, right?
That's right.
Okay. Well, I'll talk to you later this weekend, hopefully.
Yeah, see you later.
Thank you.
Bye.